The veto session ends with a whimper, and Bruce Rauner says the budget situation is really bad. We'll talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the program where we talk about state issues, sometimes federal issues, and how they just might affect your life. I'm Bernie Schoenberg from the State Journal-Register. The legislature has gone home for a little while in the midst of, you could call it a state crisis. And here to talk about it, a couple of people who watch this stuff carefully. Bob Goff is back, editor of QuincyJournal.com. Thanks for making the drive to Springfield for the show.
Good to see you, Bernie.
Carrie Lester makes her first appearance on the show. Thanks, Carrie. She is for about a year and a half now, the bureau chief of the Associated Press Bureau at the State House. Carrie, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And Carrie, I guess we'll start with you because the Senate has finished its business, the House finished its business. Mm-hmm. It looks like they're both not coming back until the inauguration. And I guess that's the new governor gets sworn in on the 12th of January. So where are we? I said in the intro to the show that they ended with a whimper. Is that adequate or a good way to say it?
I think so, Bernie. And I think that we all had some speculation that this might happen. And there was a lot of movement this week. And sure enough, the rumors turned out to be true. House Speaker Michael Madigan adjourned his chamber sine die, meaning they have concluded business until a new General Assembly is sworn in. So he's eliminating the possibility of a lame duck session. I chased him out of the chamber yesterday and talked to him in the speaker's hallway before he was going into his office, which is a side note, he has a little key for that, which I thought was kind of interesting to watch him pull that out and go in. And he had said, he wasn't planning on calling them back. He felt the House had done its business for the year, and I asked if there was any possibility of a special session because the Senate passed a minimum wage bill. Governor Quinn has made this a focus in recent weeks. He really, really wants to get this done, but Madigan said that's our plan. So we've been checking in over the last couple days with the governor's office, with Senate President Cullerton's office, with Madigan's office, to see if there might be any sort of talk at this point of reconvening for a special session, but it doesn't seem to be in the cards at this point. Just before I left to come over here, Senate President Cullerton adjourned his chamber midday Thursday, and he said, we're going to keep the Senate open until the 13th of January, but we don't expect to have you back. We don't expect to take any major action. So I think that does indicate that they're done.
Yeah, Bob, Bruce Rauner, the governor-elect who will take office on the 12th, clearly didn't want the General Assembly to do anything major. He said that more than once before they adjourned. Do you think people in Quincy are happy about this?
Yeah, I think that what they want to see is they want to see the new governor and the new legislature tackle these problems together. Governor-elect Rauner was very clear that he didn't want any action taken. And, is it tough to see if this is an olive branch by Speaker Madigan or just Speaker Madigan wants to say, well, let's let the new guy, let's see what the new guy's got and let's see what the new guy brings to the table on these things. And I think there's a little bit of why would Speaker Madigan want to give Governor Quinn a legacy issue like a minimum wage increase on his way out the door. I just don't think he wanted to do that either. So I think it's a case of everybody's going to come back in January. You're going to have the governor, you're going to have his new cabinet in there, you're going to have the new General Assembly in there, and then they'll start tackling these huge problems, as Governor-elect Rauner found out.
We do have huge. Yeah, January. I want to go back to the minimum wage issue just a little bit because, Carrie, as you know, the city of Chicago took, it seemed like, action to try to preempt what the legislature was doing by passing something, if I'm correct, that will raise the minimum wage in that city alone up to, I think it's $13 by 2019. And that seemed to take any potential minimum wage action by both houses of the General Assembly for statewide action off the rails. I'm not sure if Madigan indicated that's the case. I know they talked about complications had arisen, and I think that's the city of Chicago. What's the deal? Did what the city of Chicago did end up ruining that legacy thing of getting a minimum wage for Quinn, do you think?
I think it made it a lot harder. And I think that State Senator Kimberly Lightford's revamped proposal, which she introduced, made an attempt to kind of smooth things over. She would have under the bill, Chicago would have been able to keep their rate but not raise it any higher than $13 in 2019. But for the rest of the state, the wage would have been incrementally raised raised from $9 starting next July to $11 in 2019. So you still have this dual wage going on, but it's not as large of a gap as we're going to have right now if nothing else is done. So I just think that I was texting lawmakers and trying to talk to them as the Democratic caucus was meeting on Tuesday night, and that is when Madigan apparently formally pulled the plug on the legislation and told his members he did not have the votes. It was closer with preemption, but still not close to the 60 that he needed.
So was the problem that like legislators from the city of Chicago weren't going to vote on anything else now that their own city did something, or where do you see how did this mess things up? Do we know?
Well, I think that it presented concerns for people on the borders of Chicago, and I just think there were regional divides that emerged over this, and they were always there, but I do think Chicago moving to do this made it worse, and I don't know that is Madigan giving Rahm Emanuel a win? Is he to me, even though he sponsored that legislation that put the referendum on the ballot, asking voters if they wanted to raise the wage. I've never found Madigan to be that much of a public advocate for raising the wage, even though he is the Democratic Party chair.
Of course, he has a notoriously straight-laced look about him. You can never tell exactly what that poker face is saying, and congratulations on getting him to actually talk in the hallway. That's pretty cool.
It's a rarity for sure.
Bob, you talked about the budget situation, the big problems that the state is facing. Bruce Rauner talked about that again in over a 3-week span of time. He was in Springfield having meetings with people in the comptroller's office and saying each time to a press availability with reporters that, this budget situation is worse than we thought. And we're talking about the loss of the state income tax, or the reduction as planned earlier, but as Quinn wanted to continue, from 5% on individuals down to 3.75% January 1st. We're talking about like $4 billion a year in revenue that will be lost. And then he was talking about, when he met with reporters this past week, how the state's been borrowing from funds, which many people who watch it closely knew, but he was talking about this as a grand new revelation. So what happens with this tax situation? Does Bruce Rauner, is he setting the stage for, people call it a Thompson moment, because Jim Thompson, was among the governors in recent decades who said we don't need a tax increase. Then they get in office and say, it's terrible, we have to do it. Is that what's happening here?
Well, he's talked about the service tax before, so that could be something that's on the table. I think you're going to see that he has also said he isn't necessarily against a minimum wage increase as long as it comes with other benefits for businesses, such as workers' comp reform and things like that. So I think what you're going to have to do is they're going to get in there and it's not, this problem has been brewing for a long time, so it's not like it's going to be fixed in one fell swoop. I think you're going to see a whole lot of mechanisms put in place, a lot of negotiating on both sides. I think the service tax is a real possibility, and I think that's something, when you looked at the services that were going to be taxed, I know there might be some of those where you might have new taxes that will pop up that weren't discussed before, and then you'll have others that might be pulled back.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah. Carrie, do you think any of this can happen? And again, part of the mix is you're still have an overwhelmingly Democratic legislature, and when you talk about, like on the minimum wage thing, business reforms, Democrats don't like some of those business reforms as a philosophy. So can they work together? Can they compromise and get us service taxes on enough services? Because the ones Rauner had proposed, I think it was less than $1 billion a year, and we're talking, again, at least $4 billion in a budget gap. Can they work together? Can this get done?
I think they can. I think what you saw this week was there were things happening on two levels with Rauner. I think he is laying the groundwork to wiggle a little bit if that tax increase needs to be extended. I mean, we've seen him change his phrasing a little bit on the campaign trail, saying it should be incrementally rolled back. So I expect to see a continuing softening of his stance as he becomes more aware of just how bad the budget is. That was the other thing I saw, Bernie. This is a guy who's held elected office for the first time. He has a great business mind, he has a great handle on things, but he's really immersing himself in state government and politics for the first time. And so I think as he meets with these state budget experts, he's going, holy cow, this really is bad, and he's realizing that this is not, just going to be fixed overnight.
He should have watched his own advertisements about that 100 years of failure.
That's true. He told me recently he never watches the ads. So
seriously? Is that right?
his own. So
interesting. another kind of situation that the legislature was struggling with in its veto session was to see if Illinois could create its own health exchange to deal with Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, which has, I guess, like 600,000 some people have signed up in Illinois. And there is some fear that a federal subsidy to the lower income of those folks could be lost based on a coming U.S. Supreme Court decision. They've taken a case that could be decided in that way if your state doesn't have its own exchange. So Robin Gable, state representative from Evanston, my hometown, was trying to forward that bill, but it did not get through the General Assembly. So does that just leave Illinois kind of in a lurch and waiting for what happens with the Supreme Court? Is that where we are?
I think so. I think that what they want to do is look at that and see how that's going to affect it before the exchanges are put back into place. Obamacare always seems to be a moving target. That there's always a new revelation or there's a new piece of it that we don't know about, and with a new Congress coming in as well, I think it's going to change even more. And the Supreme Court. But the problem is, I think everybody has to wait on the Supreme Court decision before they can make another move on it.
I've heard from some members, in talking, gossiping along the rail, that there is hopes of establishing this in the new year. But you have two problems there. Rauner has not indicated how he feels about this. I'll be curious to see what he says. But two, you know how problematic Obamacare is in terms of campaign literature. Michael Madigan kept his supermajority this year, but at the same time, he had a number of members, including Frank Mautino. He's a top member of Democratic leadership who had a very, very close race. He's been instrumental in trying to get this pushed, along with Gable. And so I don't know how looking to 2016, how that might affect this.
Yeah, and interestingly, whatever change happens, it's going to be potential gridlock in Washington, because now the Republicans have taken over the majority that will come in the U.S. Senate, so they'll have both houses. And you have President Obama, who seems reinvigorated somehow, now taking on a totally Republican Congress. So they're going to be clashing over bits and pieces of that as well. One of the changes that did get through in the veto session was I think institutionalizing or saying that we should continue the same day, election day registration for people as part of just an election update bill. It was passed initially just for use in the November 4th election, where people could come in and register on election day, vote that day, provisional ballot. It was actually, potentially those ballots that helped turn the tide in some of the races, maybe the state treasurer's race, where you had 30,000 votes up in the Chicago area, and some other counties too, so it may not have all been the vaunted Cook County situation. But that is now being made permanent. I think some Republicans I heard were saying, let's not do this yet. We haven't been able to analyze how this all really worked, and they worry that Democratic constituencies will be better represented in same-day registration than Republican ones. Just any thoughts on, is that kind of openness? It's actually, Illinois has become more open in voting than while many other states have kind of cut back on voting opportunities. And that does seem to be something that even Bruce Rauner has said is okay, even though he's a Republican, and some Republican-dominated states are the ones where they've cut back on these.
I was worried that it was going to cause an impact in election results this year, and it was going to be a problem. But really, in Adams County, there wasn't a big issue. People were able to go to the courthouse and register and vote. It had to change the way the county clerk sort of marshaled her manpower a little bit, because she had to have people actually at the courthouse. I mean, you've always got people at the courthouse, but even though it was closed that day, but then she had to also have the extra staff on hand at the election judges to have them go and send people who are like, hey, I can sign up and vote, right? Well, no, you have to go to the courthouse and do that. Same thing. So there was, and I was anticipating a nightmare. We weren't going to get results till 9 o'clock at night, but it ended up running pretty smoothly. So, and I think, and I know we had the late vote counting in the treasurer's race, but aside from that, I didn't hear a lot of horror stories about this that I was anticipating. So I guess if it worked out on what should have been probably your second heaviest election day cycle aside from a presidential, well, then I guess it's okay, because you're going to have a lot more smaller elections as well.
And I agree with you. I think that I was bracing for this endless election night where deadlines are blown and you can't get your story out because you don't know the results, all these terrifying scenarios. And it largely ended up to go pretty smoothly. But I was really interested to watch the floor debate this week. You had Barbara Flynn Curry pushing this legislation in the House, and you had Republicans on the other side of the aisle just yelling and screaming that they do not have data proving that this is as successful
Barbara
as.
Flynn Curry, of course, is top lieutenant to Madigan.
Yes.
Speaker Madigan in the House.
Yes, and she says this has been overwhelmingly successful. This is only going to increase access, but Republicans like State Representative Ron Sandak, who's now in Republican leadership, he's from the Chicago suburbs, he was saying, show me the data. And I talked to Rupert Borgsmiller of the State Board of Election, and I guess the deadline for the county clerks to submit their numbers on how successful this was is December 8th. So I believe is that next Monday. Mm-hmm. So we should know pretty quickly how successful this was, even though this is now law. But
well, of course, the governor, I assume, still has to sign it. So by some miracle, Governor Quinn could decide not to agree to these changes.
Yeah,
but one would guess that he will agree to these changes.
Given that he has not gotten minimum wage yet, this is one last piece of his legacy that he could claim for
That's
himself.
Right. Well, yeah, we'll have to see how he handles his last few weeks of being governor, because clearly he might try, despite what Madigan said, to call lawmakers back to pass that minimum wage, even though it would be odd because all indications are he just can't get it done at this point. So.
But he is kind of an unpredictable guy, and he's called him back before.
As he has been for 30 years.
Yeah. So you could kind of see him wanting to go out in flames.
Big story in the Springfield area because of the many thousands of state employees, and of course people hope Bruce Rauner, despite the budget, will bring more because he's talked about it. We'll see. Is the pension program, the pension changes that were passed by the General Assembly that have been struck down by Circuit Judge John Bells in Springfield. Lisa Madigan, the Attorney General, has now indicated that she will be appealing to the Supreme Court. I don't know if we can handicap a court case, but is there any chance this law will be resurrected by the Supreme Court after Judge Bells has gone along with some other decisions, like on health care costs? You can't, the state constitution says you can't diminish pension benefits once received. And Lisa Madigan, the state argument is we are in an emergency, therefore this is a contract and you can change contracts in an emergency. But judges so far have not seemed to go along with that. So any chance that Lisa Madigan, in her appeal on behalf of this state law, will be successful?
I don't think so, and I think the state's just going to have to figure out what to do here. I know the pension issue, one of the things that I've talked about on this program and other places, I still think that at some point the legislature, and it might not be this year, it might be down the road, eventually school districts, the downstate school districts will have a new pension levy. I just think that's something that they're going to have to do to make this happen, so then they can pay for their share instead of because of how screwed up the TRS
Oh, you think it'll actually be fanned out to school districts?
I think they're going to have to.
Because there's been great resistance to that so far, because other than the city of Chicago, all the teachers in the state are paid by the teachers' retirement system. They complain that state law sets these pensions and it all goes into that system, but the local districts keep raising the pay of teachers.
They do.
They
raise the pensions.
The state has to pay the pension
and
costs.
The local districts give the bumps to incentivize retirements. Now, the Quincy School District a few months ago, their school board whacked that. They said, no, we're not going to give the 6% bump to incentivize retirement.
I think more are doing that because there's been some sunlight on the process.
Yeah, so I think that's going to happen. But I think at some point they're going to have the school districts are going to have to eat that, and I think it's going to be part of the total pension reform package and the total school funding package as well. And that can only mean one thing. It can mean property taxes are going to go up, even though I know one of Governor-elect Rauner's pledges was freeze property taxes, which I never did figure out how he was going to do that.
Yeah, so. Where do we go with this, Kerry? I mean, obviously even Governor Quinn in the inadequate budget that the legislature passed and that he ended up signing, knowing that a new administration would be coming in, it didn't include money from that pension fix, so it's not there. But this creates another giant hole, and we do have that promise from Bruce Rauner. He's going to freeze property taxes, which is a local thing. Yeah. So how does any of this happen, or is it just going to be a system where we will see compromises that the governor-elect, when he becomes governor, has to make, and the Democrats have to go along with? I don't know.
I think you have to, and I think you look to history at times when Madigan has compromised with other Republican governors over the last 30 years. But I think a lot of things are going to have to give, and as we negotiate a perhaps another piece of pension reform legislation, you also have to look at school funding and how that's working. I mean, you have downstate districts right now that are at a severe disadvantage compared to the Chicago suburbs and Chicago proper, and there's just going to be a lot of budget messes in the year ahead, I think.
Yes, there are. We do have an inauguration coming up. This will be a big deal for Springfield. I haven't heard a lot of details, although I did see there were some schedules of how much you could pay to be a corporate sponsor. I think $25,000 for 4 tickets to various things, etc. Maybe a dinner the night of the 11th, and then the event on the 12th, and then of course the General Assembly a couple days later on that'll be on Monday is the 12th, and then on Wednesday the 14th will be when the General Assembly gets sworn in. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing we'll have a Madigan and a Cullerton once again in leadership. Just any thoughts on I guess companies that donate to inaugural events, I guess that's just kind of old-time Illinois politics, isn't it? When we have even reformers ask people to donate to these things, is that a problem? I don't know, or is that just the way it works?
I don't have a particularly long view on this here, but this is my first time covering a gubernatorial transition. But at the same time, I've certainly heard questions from sources in terms of how the governor-elect is going about it. I think you can donate to his transition process on the same site where people can apply for jobs.
I actually put that in the column. Yeah,
there are just all these eyebrows being raised, but. It does seem to be in line with, getting private donations seems to be in line with how we've done it in the past.
I will say that the spokesman for the governor, Mike Schrimpf, I asked about that. If you've got this elaborate application to apply for jobs in the new Rauner administration, they want to know, do you have anything in your past that could be looked at sideways or cause any problems, any legal trouble, any political trouble? Have you made any public statements? And then there's a donate button. And I asked, isn't that just bad in the nature of the way Illinois in the past has seen people, pay this and get that? And the answer was, and it is, I found out it is true. I talked to somebody from the Thompson administration. There has been public funding for transition in the past, and they are trying to do the transition without public funding. This is a way to do it, so people have to donate. I'm sure people can look at Bruce Rauner and say, oh, he could just spend it all, but even in the campaign, he obviously has a lot of personal resources, but you always want to get other people involved in these kinds of things, I guess.
He's already going to pay to fix the mansion, so.
Well, he said private funding, but he didn't commit that it would all be his own, right? There is a mansion association that has been able for some years to take donations, so I assume it will go through that. But I'm also assuming that he and the Mrs. Rauner will probably make somewhat of an issue of being in the mansion more.
You don't want to live in a house with a leaky roof. I mean.
Well, I was coming out of the governor's office a few weeks ago, and I noticed a few of his fundraisers with some notepads taking notes along the rail in the second floor of the Capitol. And I said, "What are you doing here?" And they were looking at something, but they were headed over to the mansion to kind of take some notes on the state of disrepair. And one of them mentioned to me that we hope to get a statewide movement going on fixing the mansion. I don't know if that'll happen, but I do think people are interested in quite how bad it looks inside right now.
Well, anytime you're moving into a new house, you've got to take care of that. So I think he's the guy moving in. He's the guy who should take care of that.
Will he keep the chickens is the other question that Governor Quinn has in the yard.
I saw a little coverage, and I don't know if either of you covered it, but eavesdropping and the new state law that has just been passed to kind of replace the eavesdropping law. I know that there are some questions. It used to be in Illinois that you could not record somebody without asking, without their permission, and then that was overturned by a court. Mm-hmm. So it's just been open season on recording, and now there's a new one, and I don't know many specifics, but I know that there are some questions about it, and even the sponsors, as they pass it on to the governor, say maybe it's going a little too far, because any kind of communication passed on to others without their knowledge may cause legal trouble, and that could, even passing along an email, might be in question now. So it might be something that the governor will want to use. I guess it's too late for an mandatory veto. I don't know what happens with that, but we'll see where that goes. It's in the age of what's been going on with various police actions and body cameras and citizens who want to tape the police, and if they do it surreptitiously. It used to be in Illinois you could go to jail for like 15 years if you tape recorded a police person without asking. And now, they're trying to reach a balance. We'll see where it goes. And now let's talk about bobcats. Actually, State Senator Sam McCann from the Carlinville area, and who represents part of Springfield, is a big hunter, and certainly is in line with people who do that. And apparently the bobcat population has reached in various parts of the state up to about 3,000, and while there are some animal rights people who say no, they were, if not on the endangered list, on the challenge list. Now we should be able to have a hunting season, and so they've passed a bill to allow the Department of Natural Resources to create a hunting season for bobcats.
Yeah, I was saying earlier I really enjoyed that election law debate on the House floor. I enjoyed the bobcat hunting debate on the Senate floor this morning. It was incredible. I mean, you had people on both sides of the aisle yelling about this. State Senator Linda Holmes from Aurora, she is particularly opposed to this and, kept saying, we hunt for food and we hunt for sustenance and we hunt for a bunch of things, but this is trophy hunting. She just did not understand why we would possibly do it. But advocates say that this formerly endangered species, I think they took it off the endangered species list in 1999, that the population is rising in rural non-farm areas. And under this legislation, I think the season would be from November to about mid-February. You could hunt one bobcat a year. So
who knew?
Who knew? And there were all sorts of questions asked about bobcat mating season and things I never expected to hear on the Senate floor. But and questions of why this was coming up at the last minute. But it is now
I know
law.
that some people were saying, well, I wish we talked as much about schools and kids as we did about bobcats.
Yes.
Hunting is giant in regions of the state,
Adams County
right?
was the #2 in deer harvest this year in the state. I know bobcats, not only some people consider it a safety issue that they could cause harm to some livestock. I know that was part of the issue. I know that's been a concern from a lot of the people around Adams County as well.
There you go. Well, on that bobcat note, we're going to stop it. Bob Goff, thank you very much. Carrie Lester, welcome to your initial show. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm Bernie Schoenberg. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Capitol View.